Hello, and welcome to the UCI Scholarship Opportunities Program tutorial on the Trailblazers 10 application process. In this tutorial, I'll provide a general overview of the 10 scholarships covered by this pre-application and internal advising process, information about how SOP staff supports candidates, and the phases of the application process. SOP provides all candidates comprehensive advising throughout the application process of approximately 3 to 6 months. For the T10, the scholarship process starts in April and goes through September, October, depending on the award deadline. Over the summer, this is a similar time commitment to a 4-unit class. Treat it as such. Consider your time commitments as we have strict deadlines every 1 or 2 weeks at noon. We understand, however, that you are first and foremost a student, so please communicate with us about any scheduling or deadline issues. Depending on the award and situation, we may be able to grant extensions. Please note that failure to meet deadlines may result in your removal from the T10 process. Your assigned SOP professional advisor will meet regularly with you, serving as a guide or coach while targeting support and resources to your goals. SOP provides applicants access to many resources, including Canvas, to manage your draft submissions and interactions with your advisor, a detailed application process overview for your scholarship with expert tips, and past winning application samples. Most importantly, as you write and reflect, you will have multiple opportunities to discuss your work with your assigned SOP professional advisor. Applicants to scholarships that permit essay feedback will also have guaranteed access to a professional writing specialist from the Center for Excellence in Writing and Communication. This is a long process, but completely worth the outcome. You will be more informed about your career path and personal goals, improve your essay writing and interview skills, and have a model for goal setting and time management. Moreover, you will develop a portfolio of materials that will serve you well in future applications, whether for other scholarships, graduate school, or the job search. Now we will briefly overview the Trailblazers 10 process and then zoom into each phase or step to explore them further. Your first phase takes place in April and is exploratory. You'll brainstorm a lot with online journal entries and your advisor to help find an application strategy and awards that best match you. In May, you'll start mapping these insights onto an application and receive feedback from your SOP advisor and writing specialist. In June and July, as you will blaze a trail for your essays. If necessary, campus endorsement interviews happen in August, and in September, you'll reach the summit and submit your finalized application. You can find the T10 deadline table and specific award timeline information in Canvas. In the exploratory phase, you'll look at past winning apps to get a sense of how past applicants have narrated their own stories and use journal reflections to explore the building blocks of your own narrative. Your journal explorations will also help you find direction and map out your intentions for the scholarship advising process. In the mapping phase, we also begin to narrow down what scholarships are a best match for you. We do so by evaluating your eligibility in terms of citizenship, age, or majors, as well as the type of program that best fits your long-term career goals. Your preference for a leadership or research-oriented career or for studying in the US or abroad can also help us pinpoint the right scholarship quickly. In these first two phases, we will also help you identify letter writers among your faculty and mentors. The type of awards you are applying for should influence who you ask. For a research award, you want professors who have observed your research and know your coursework. But for a teaching award, you may choose a mentor who is more familiar with your writing, mentoring, and tutoring skills. Finally, it is important to note that some of the to-dos are not busy work, but are a key part of the application process. These tasks help you prepare for the SOP advising meetings, get you started thinking more deeply about your experiences and goals, and get you connected to your support network. Now we will briefly overview the different aspects of the T10 or Trailblazers 10 awards. The first 7 awards are highly prestigious scholarships that fully fund experiences abroad after graduation. The Rhodes, Marshall, Churchill, and Gates Cambridge fund students to go to the United Kingdom for graduate study, and the Mitchell is for universities in the Republic of Ireland. The Gates Cambridge and Churchill also funds study at Cambridge University, with the Churchill only for science degree programs. Similarly, the Rhodes only funds study at Oxford. These awards comprise some of the most prestigious and competitive scholarships in the world. The Schwarzman Scholars Program is similar in leadership and competition, but it focuses on global leadership development at Tsinghua University in Beijing. Finally, the Fulbright is the most popular award among SOP applicants and supports 1 academic year abroad and over 140 countries, with several different options such as graduate study or independent research, a creative project such as art or dancing or film, an English teaching assistantship, or binational business or policy internship. All of these awards accept applications from US citizens. Rhodes, Gates Cambridge, and Schwarzman have no citizenship restrictions. Rhodes, Schwarzman, and Mitchell also have age restrictions. These abroad awards generally do not support medical or pre-professional graduate programs. However, completing a master's degree or an independent project abroad first can greatly enhance your competitiveness for applications for medical and pre-professional programs. We also offer advising on 3 graduate scholarships for use domestically within the United States. Knight Hennessy Scholars is a new domestic scholarship for graduate study in any discipline at Stanford University. The highly popular National Science Foundation Graduate Research Fellowship Program, or NSF, supports U.S. citizens and permanent residents in U.S. research-based graduate programs in the STEM field. The Paul and Daisy Soros Scholarship is exclusively for new or first-generation Americans, including U.S. citizens, permanent residents, and undocumented students. Whatever your status, both birth parents must have been born outside the U.S. Another way to think about these awards and what may be the best fit for you is to consider their competitiveness. As a quick reference point, it's important to keep in mind how many applicants each funding agency receives, alongside how many grants they typically award. In the T10 cycle, the Fulbright and NSF have the highest overall percentage. That is, there is a higher chance of receiving the award. They can do so because they are a large, federally funded program designed to increase access to graduate education for U.S. students. Small, privately funded programs like Knight, Hennessy, and Soros are not able to offer as many awards, which increases their competitiveness. For something like Fulbright, it's also helpful to consider the variation of competitiveness by each country and each award type. Countries, such as those whose national language is English or don't require additional language requirements, such as the UK, are going to have a higher number of applicants over a country like Israel, whose language is not as well known. Some countries also accept higher ETAs over study research awards, which is the case over here with Germany. And some countries are the other way around, where they accept higher study research awards over ETAs, like you see over here with Mexico. Additional benefits like partner support, child care stipends, and extra housing or research funds also vary from country to country. Going back now to the phases of the T10 process, after the mapping phase and the exploratory phase and the mapping phase, we now enter the trailblazing phase, where you will revise 2 to 3 drafts of your application. After you turn in each draft, you will receive detailed written feedback from SOP staff. For most of the awards, you will also meet with a writing specialist in the Center for Excellence in Writing and Communication to brainstorm and revise the content, organization, and phrasings of your essays. Rhodes, Mitchell, and Schwartzman candidates do not work with a writing specialist because they have essay editing restrictions. At this point in the process, we also encourage you to obtain a letter of affiliation if going abroad and necessary for your application, a language evaluation, again, if necessary, and supplementary materials for arts or other special grants. In terms of what you'll be composing, scholarship essays include 2 basic genres: the statement of purpose and the personal statement. The statement of purpose is your plan for graduate study, or perhaps your plan for a specific project, whereas your personal statement is your scholarly biography, or maybe an essay that explains your leadership abilities and what you consider to be a good leader. Once you understand these genres, you can adapt your writing to the specific prompt and audience for your scholarship. Depending upon audience or purpose of the statement, there are several questions your SOP advisor will ask you to help tailor these documents to the specific organization and award type. Some of the questions I have on the screen. It's also important to note that most of these funding organizations have their own values and their own mission statements. So part of the strategy in tailoring what you're going to write about in your statement of purpose or your personal statement is trying to demonstrate how your own goal, vision, and values overlap with those of the funding organization. Our last step, our last phase as well in the process, is the view from the summit. The Graduate Study Abroad Awards mentioned earlier, outside of Schwartzman and Gates Cambridge, participate in a campus endorsement interview with SOP staff, faculty, and a dean of undergraduate education. Knight Hennessy also participates in the campus endorsement process. So for those that participate in the campus endorsement process, the view from the summit has 2 steps: the endorsement interview and the final submission. For those awards that do not have an endorsement component, then the last step is going to simply be to submit. Going back to the endorsement, what is an institutional endorsement? I'm glad you asked. An institutional endorsement means that a fellowship applicant is submitting their application with the official approval of their college or university. In the case of UCI, this process is administered through our office. An institutional endorsement usually indicates that a fellowship nominee has gone through an internal selection process. Think of it as a stamp of approval from the university. Interviews are held in August for approximately 1 hour. While this process can seem daunting, its overall purpose is not to rule you out as a candidate, but provide additional support. You will gain valuable insight from the members of the committee that you can utilize for a final draft of your materials. An additional benefit from the endorsement process is that SOP staff will then write a comprehensive letter of endorsement, including feedback from the committee, which functions as an additional letter of recommendation from the campus. After you have submitted your application, it proceeds to an external review by a regional or national scholarship committee selected by the funding agency. These committees select finalists or semifinalists, creating a short list of students who are especially qualified for the award. Some semifinalists then conduct a second interview with the funding agency or country representatives in the case of FULBRIGHT. SOP staff helps prepare you for these with mock interviews, so don't worry. Recipient notifications occur throughout the academic year. Rhodes and Marshall tend to notify at the end of November or in December, whereas other awards are not notified until spring. As a final reminder, if you intend to participate with us in this process, please check your emails frequently, visit Canvas often, make use of the resources we provide there, and communicate with SOP regularly. Good luck and have fun.